Angels. Welcome to Conscious Life Expo. We're really happy to see you. This is our 21st year. We think this is going to be the best expo ever, so thank you for coming out.
Yeah,
thank you for coming out. Give yourself a round of applause for leaving your house. This woman is quite incredible. She is one of the most incredible go-getters. What she thinks about, she puts into motion. She supports. She's a practical, spiritual businesswoman. I think you're fantastic at that. She supports the awakening and ascension of humanity through her books, her sessions, her retreats, her large events. You can even go, can't you take people on retreats in Sedona?
Yes, I do.
That's
Super
right.
fun.
And don't you take them on UFO sightings also?
I have friends that do that.
She knows everyone in the metaphysical world, which is why having a Sedona Ascension retreat is the right thing to do. She's also the founder of what do you call it?
Sci-Spi.
Sci-Spi. I like got tongue-tied with that. Sci-Spi TV of transcendence events. So she's really wonderful. She's a networker. She has conscious media, and she's here to really talk to you about herself and her transcendence process, and you will feel different when she's done.
Thank you, sweet dear. Thank you, I love you. Thank you.
All right. And you'll see me at the
Okay. All right. So welcome to my virtuality workshop. Here we're going to learn how to hack reality since we are living in a simulation. But as I like to say, we are not just Sims in some virtual reality game. We are sourced by our eternal soul essence, who is sourced by God consciousness, right? And so to begin today's workshop, I'd like to play this video, and hopefully it plays when I hit this bar. With my fascination for consciousness, I was ready to take things to the next level and start exploring avatar consciousness. Greetings, avatars. Are we avatars being programmed by our source self, who's experiencing these virtual realities through us as us? Is our source self seated behind a computer screen and choosing different projections of itself as different personalities in different timelines and dimensions? Is our source self using DNA codes to program these avatars? And is there an architect writing code for all of these programmed realities? Beyond digital consciousness, I began to wonder about sacred geometry and how that was being used to create the forms in our reality. And then I discovered emergence theory. This theory combines sacred geometry and multidimensionality to create a pixelated space-time programmed reality. In this theory, there is an E8 crystal being projected from the 8th dimension onto the 4th dimension to create a quasi-crystal in order to derive 3D space-time. A quasi-crystal point space. From this theory, they've also derived a theory of everything that requires just 7 elements: information, causality loops, non-determinism, consciousness, pixelation, the E8 crystal, and the golden mean ratio. Could this be the theory of everything? The holy grail of physics? And what about time? Quantum physics is showing that linear time doesn't exist. And in truth, all time is happening all the time. And all time is influencing all time, all of the time. This confirms all of our theories that we've already been exploring, that everything is happening all at once in one eternal now moment. And we are creating our realities with our free will choices. How empowering is that? Ultimately, there's only one reason we really come into existence, and that is to experience love. Let's come together and co-create a world where love, freedom, peace, and harmony prevail.
Yay! That sets the stage.
So I'm so pleased that I was able to set the stage with that video, because it really encompasses what I'm talking about when I talk about virtual reality and this idea that we are living in this virtual reality game. Yay! And I can move it. As avatars being projected by our source self, and this universe we live in actually has a source too. Like any hologram that is being projected, it must have some kind of data set upon which to create the avatar out of, or the hologram out of, right? Science proved long ago that this is a holographic reality and that matter and energy are interchangeable, right? And also, many discoveries in quantum physics are proving that our reality is pixelated. Of course, the magical, mystical science of quantum physics is starting to prove many spiritual concepts that we've long known as spiritual practitioners, like we are of and from one infinite source, one infinite creator, that we are immortal beings, that we are existential beings as our eternal soul who is living in one eternal now moment, right? And then ourselves as experiential beings, living in time. And here in this hologram of space-time, we can know thyself through experiences that have a beginning and an ending. So we are starring in this movie that we are walking through, producing, directing, right? A point that I like to make, though, about this idea that we're living in a simulation is that we're not being played. Unlike Sims, we are souls who are infused by our source self or our eternal soul essence, right? But also, we have free will. And there is no one that is playing us. We are playing the games ourselves, and along the way, making our own choices in every moment of every day about what we wish to do next in time, right? And so, because you're at Conscious Life Expo, I'm guessing that you're all on an evolutionary journey. Who here is living consciously and consciously evolving now? Very good. And how do we evolve, right? Every moment of every day, we're making every effort to be the highest version of our best self. Patient, kind, compassionate, taking the high road as much as possible without being a doormat, right? But we still want to be taking the high road in the way that we interact with others, in the way that we react to our reality, right? And so this is really the spiritual side of being the best person we can possibly be every day, radiating pure unconditional love to all beings, including ourselves. But the other side of the evolution is knowledge and wisdom. To understand the secrets of the universe is necessary for your evolvement, for you must become the master of the universe in order for the celestial gates to open for you into higher dimensions. It's important to understand how this reality works. And so there are scientists now who have discovered within supersymmetry that binary code is literally written into the fabric of space-time. That is a computer board. Scientists have discovered that ones and zeros are literally written into the fabric of space-time. What are ones and zeros but an on-off code, pulsating on-off, to give you ones and zeros? It's a computer language. And so, interestingly enough, and Desiree and JJ Hertalk are here, and they're good friends of mine, and they have a home in Sedona where I'm from. Big fan of his books. His last 10 keys, because his original book, the Book of Knowledge, Keys of Enoch, was only 54 keys, right? And so he wanted to wait, because this first incident that happened that compelled him to write the 54 Keys of Enoch, where he was transported into a higher realm by Enoch and taken into the presence of Metatron, where he says he was downloaded with all of these burning scrolls full of fire letters and key codes, the codes of Enoch, right? And so he knew that he was only to write 54 until humanity was evolved enough for the next 10 codes. And now he's written, I think, 7 of those. And so these are called light picture superscripts. And so indicating through different forms, sacred geometry, different elements in science and physics, how our reality is coded or scripted. Sometimes we hear, it is written, right? Are these realities already all written, scripted, designed in some kind of computer code? And who is the gamer writing these computer games in code, right? And so it's so interesting that we're starting to get more and more very real looking virtual reality games or computer games, right? Because it's emulating this space-time experience that we're having. And so I wanted to bring up the 54 Keys of Enoch and how important that is, because if we are computer-generated beings, how are we encoded? DNA, right? It is the code written within our beings to make us who and how we are. So of course we become very interested in our own genetic code, because it is the creation codes of our beings. And here at this conference, you'll hear a lot about codes and light codes, right? So I found it quite interesting that the diamond code that defines our genetic codes is actually 4 to the power of 3 for what? 64. And by the way, we have 64 billion cells in our being, and each one of those little cells is like a little mini computer. Can DNA evolve? Well, at the time that I got this information, it said that physicists were able to determine the sequences of 54 out of 64 codons in their experiment. DNA had only evolved to 54 until JJ Hertalk comes out with his 10 light superscripts. Then we'll be able to evolve to 64. 64 codons they'll be able to determine. But isn't that interesting? It's as if JJ Hertalk, in his experience of being downloaded with these burning scrolls, was told only to give the 54 until humanity is ready to evolve into being able to have these 64 keys encoded in their DNA. Yes, we are biophotonic beings, and that's really important because light carries information. Light is nothing other than information. Now, I think a good analogy to understand this is fiber optics. So Information-filled light is traveling at the speed of light through fiber optic cables from computer hubs to your home computer. And that's why when you type in something like monkeys, suddenly you get monkeys on your screen, because light has traveled at the speed of light carrying that information to you. Light is filled with information, and so light carries information. Light carries codes. This is why people talk about light codes, right? So if we're biophotonic beings, then we can open to receive in-streaming light filled with creation codes. In ancient times, the Hindus had this particular mantra they would use standing in front of the sun and saying this particular mantra in order to receive the light streaming in from the central sun. This light streaming in carries information. Information in the form of creation codes. And so you can say this mantra standing in front of the sun and ask to be downloaded with these creation codes, because they are coming through our central sun, which is receiving light from the great central sun at the core of creation. We each have our own unique code because we each have our own unique frequency signature. And some channeled sources call it a cote, K-O-T-E, okay? But you are coded just like a radio station. 101.1, 106.7, 95.5, right? And this allows us to be identified, located within this database, okay? And that's important because we are being tracked in a sense, supervised in a sense, mostly by our oversoul. However, we also have spiritual guides and ascended masters and even our galactic brothers and sisters who are very interested in our evolutionary journey. And so they want to be able to locate us and to determine our level of evolutionary progress individually and collectively. When they see that you are making a conscious effort to evolve, they will download you with information and knowledge and wisdom, even creating a higher vibrational frequency within you to assist you on your evolutionary journey. They want to give us a hand up because this isn't just an individual evolutionary path. We are on a collective evolutionary path. This isn't just an individual ascension or even a planetary ascension. This is a galactic ascension, a universal ascension, right? And so who here has received downloads? Yes, I love it, right? From our beloved galactic brothers and sisters, from the ascended masters, and from our own higher selves, right? Our own oversoul. Engraftment. So I was reading this channeled source from this book I call the Purple Book. It's like 5,000 pages. But I love books like that because they're so full of incredible information. These are beings channeling higher intelligence. And the particular channel for this book is called the Alpha Channel. And this gal is channeling all of these higher beings, including the galactics, beings from the central universe. And what they're saying is that you are being engrafted in accordance with your evolutionary progress. So the more effort that you make to evolve through being the most spiritual person that you can possibly be, and for learning advanced knowledge and wisdom, then you are reaching certain levels of evolutionary advancement that you then are gifted with engraftment. These beings say that when they detect that you've reached a certain level of evolution, they will transmit creation codes into your biophotonic being. They will engraft you with codes that activate dormant DNA. And it is possible because we are biophotonic beings. And so when I hear concepts like ascension and activate dormant DNA and light codes, I want to know the science behind it. Like, I want to be able to stand up here and say, yes, we are on an evolutionary journey. Yes, we are ascending if we make the right free will choices to do so. And as we do, we get help from our galactic brothers and sisters. And we also are engrafted with light codes based on our evolutionary progress. So does that motivate you to want to be more evolved? Like, engraft me, right? I want to activate those dormant DNA codes, because what happens when we do, we activate innate gifts, skills, and abilities, right? We start to know things that we never read or watched. And suddenly we find out, wow, we really are becoming more advanced, evolved beings. And we're even more compelled to be more love light beings in the process, right? Very compelling. And so, as you saw in the video, quantum physicists have determined that there are 7 factors necessary for virtual reality. Of course, consciousness. And we know now, and physicists are saying it across the board, that consciousness is fundamental. Matter doesn't arise from mind. Mind emerges from within an infinite field of consciousness. So everything emerges from within this field of consciousness. Information, of course, we know space-time being a hologram is a data set, is a database, right? All information. And I love this, non-determinism, free will, right? So even though in one eternal now moment, and Einstein talked about this, the block universe, past, present, and future exist all at once, it still doesn't mean that the present is determined by the future. You are still looking at the future from the present moment that you are in. And also projections of the future are based on probability, right? And so I think it was the Law of One book that talked about probability, possibility, vortexes. And so because everything is mathematical and scientific, based on all of the actions that we have taken up to this moment in time, they can pretty much determine what we're going to do in the next moment, right? We're probably going to have a dinner, similar to dinner we had last night. We're probably going to go to the same places and do the same, right? On a more practical level. But also, what's our trajectory based on our previous actions, right? And so causality loops is another way of showing how time moves based on causality. Time is a measure of, or a factor of causality. And I'll get more into time loops later, and I think you'll be pretty amazed. Pixelation, well, they've determined that reality is pixelated. It's pixelated with the tiniest possible shape, which is a tetrahedron, which is 3-sided, which has everything to do with the divine Trinity being responsible for creating. 3 shows up everywhere in creation, as does 7, because the divine Trinity, or 3, 7 is the mathematical possibilities of 3. Gender aside, Father, Son, Spirit, Father, Son, Father, Spirit, Son, Spirit, and Father, Son, and Spirit. And that's where you get the prime number of 7. 9 is also a prime number, important in creation as well. Back to 3, the 3-sided pyramid is the tetrahedron. The tetrahedron, with the tiniest Planck length all around, is the tiniest particle of creation, and it is the pixelation of creation. E8 crystal. Amazingly, this physicist named Garrett Lisi had these ideas that our reality was being projected from a higher dimension, and that this object, projecting it, would have to contain all of the elements and forces of this reality. The academics in these universities wouldn't accept his far-out ideas, so he moved to Hawaii, lived out of his van, and surfed on the beach while he sat there and figured it out. Now they have taken his concept and are expanding on it, proving it. What he came up with is called this E8 crystal. It's an incredibly beautiful spherical mandala that contains all of the elemental particles and forces that define our 3D reality. He proved that it is in the 8th dimension as an E8 crystal, is being projected into the 4th dimension as a quasi-crystal to derive 3D. And now they're proving it. We knew we were being projected from a higher dimension already, right? But now science is proving it. And then, of course, the golden ratio has everything to do with our universe being intelligent. And then there's other reasons why we live in a virtual reality, or, if you will, a simulation. As scientists started to unwind the Big Bang, the only thing to really explain the Big Bang is that it was a digital Big Bang. Because how can everything come into being from nothing? Unless it's a virtual reality game that loaded up. Before you load up your virtual reality game, there is no game, right? And so this is their reasoning behind it being a digital Big Bang, the start of the game, or the simulation, if you will. Pixelated universe, programmed, the reality is programmed with all of these mathematical codes and sequences. And the fact that there's identical parts, we're all pretty much identical. The models for cats, the models for beings, the models for horses, what have you, right? We are, in a sense, a model. And so identical parts is also in alignment with it being a virtual reality game. But what I'm interested in is the soul behind the simulation. I've seen a lot of TED Talks about the simulation, and ultimately it's like, okay, we live in a simulation. We've proved that inside and out. But I don't want to feel like a sim is being played in a virtual reality game, right? And so the soul behind the simulation and our Kundalini energy is the cord that connects us to our eternal soul essence who is projecting us. Yay! Right? And that's why I'm so into activating the Kundalini energy and ascending it up through the spine, through the 7 embodied chakras, which are levels of consciousness, right? From the root to the crown, evolving levels of ascending consciousness, and then into the 8th chakra, which is the Merkaba light vehicle. Now we are here in this spectrum. This 3rd dimension is defined by the colors of the rainbow. Who would agree? That's the spectrum of perception within this 3D reality, and it's all we can see. We can't see outside of that spectrum. It doesn't mean that spectrum doesn't exist. We just don't perceive it. Well, some of us may be perceiving it already. However, within this spectrum is also 7 levels of consciousness, and these wheels are wheels of consciousness, right? And so as we ascend that Kundalini energy up through these chakras, of course there's a lot of work involved in each chakra, right? We have to clear all the shadow energy around survival consciousness, creativity, empowerment, love, communication, intuition, our connection to the divine. But once we're able to clear any blockages and remove any shadows, our Kundalini energy should surge up our spine. Right? In Egyptian times, you saw they would have a serpent coming out of their 3rd eye, right? And we know the Kundalini energy is referred to as serpentine energy. That indicated they were enlightened. Right? And so like the caduceus symbol of the American Medical Association, you have two serpents, one red magnetic, one blue electric, ascending and braiding your spine, right? That's your electromagnetic life force, because we are electromagnetic beings. And so once we are able to ascend our Kundalini energy up through our crown chakra, then we can seat our consciousness in the 8th chakra, which is our Merkaba light vehicle. And what does that allow us to do? Soul travel beyond this spectrum and into the next spectrum, and even the next spectrum. We can soul travel to other realities outside of our spectrum. I know for myself, I've gone to other star systems and interacted with the beings there on soul travel journeys in my Merkaba light vehicle, because we can leave this limited spectrum of perception. We can do this too in dream time, right? And so I love to guide chakra journeys, and now I'm very focused on the upper chakras, because it takes us out of this 3D reality and helps us to ascend and evolve into the next reality. Thank you, dear. And so the upper chakras, the 8th Merkaba, the 9th, the oversoul orb. What does our oversoul contain? But all of the incarnations we're having in all of the different timelines and dimensions. And at the center is the eye of our essence. So in that 9th chakra, our oversoul orb, we can view all of ourselves experiencing all of the different timelines and dimensions. The 10th is the omni-brain. Here, our minds are interconnected with all of the other minds in the one great mind of the one great self, right? But when we move into the 10th chakra, we can activate that connection. We can light up those highways of light between all of the minds in all of space-time. This is when we start to develop telepathy, right? Teleportation, telekinesis, right? We have all of these advanced gifts, skills, and abilities, and also we have access to all of that information in the Akasha, all of the intelligence, tuning into all of the other minds in all of creation. Then the 11th, now, this is omniscience, all-knowing. Omnipotence, all-powering, right? And omnipresence, everywhere, all at once. The 12th gateway returns us to who we are as our eternal soul essence, whole, perfect, and complete in the real realm, our source self, in the source universe, at the core of creation. The 13th chakra is a gateway chakra to infinity, the infinite sea of pure consciousness. We know we are all a drop in the infinite sea, and the entire sea all at once, allness and nothingness. According to Theosophy, we are projecting 12 aspects of ourself into each of 12 dimensions, right? This goes back to the original 12 archetypes. We can look to the zodiac wheel, right? What do you have? You have the Divine Trinity projecting itself out in 4 directions as the 4 elements, just like the zodiac wheel. 3 earth signs, 3 water signs, 3 fire signs, right? For 12 personalities. Right? And this is how the one infinite creator wished to express itself in creation. And we as eternal souls do the same thing. So we are projecting 12 aspects of our personality into 12 dimensions, according to Theosophy, giving us 144 soul extensions, known as our monad. So neuroscientists like Donald Hoffman, Tom Campbell, they're all coming up with this idea that we are a conscious agent. I like to call it the eternal soul, but we can call it the conscious agent who is behind the scenes of this virtual reality game as our source self. And so I like to imagine that our source self is looking out at these 144 soul extensions in the game, keeping track of their evolutionary progress, right? And so has a whole sheet of icons of all the different beings it is being in space-time. And with then the ability to tune into anyone to observe it, and to nudge it, and to guide it. Even in other dimensions. Who are we being? Our source self is soul infused and seeing through the lens of space-time. What if this is what the source world looks like? Our world is a projection, reflection of it. And so we don't necessarily have to dream of someday going back to the real realm, which is paradise. Our world is a reflection of it. We are a reflection of our source self, right? And so what if we're living in paradise right now? Look how beautiful our earth is. The oceans, the mountains, the desert. Think of places like Hawaii, or even right where we're at right now in Los Angeles, right? And so we already are in the paradise realm. Our job is to bring heaven to earth, right? And to make earth heavenly. That's just sort of an example of like the lens between one world into the other. And here's a picture of that E8 mother crystal that I was telling you about, the E8 lattice, containing all of the elemental particles and forces to derive 3D. Oh, I guess we can go back to that causality loops for a second. And that is just to say that all time is influencing all time, all the time, because time is looping. And here's that tetrahedron that I was talking about with this Planck lengths. That is the form behind all of the forms of the Platonic solids. Now we know that the Platonic solids make up all the forms in our reality. And they also represent the elements. You have the tetrahedron representing fire. You have the hexahedron representing earth. You have the octahedron for air, the icosahedron for water, and the dodecahedron for consciousness. This is what the field looks like, right? This is the virtual reality field made up of all the pixelations, which are tetrahedrons. So if we're going to know all the secrets of the universe and how our reality works, we kind of have to get down and dirty with the particles of creation. I hope you don't find this too boring as we get a little nerdy here, but I am so fascinated by what makes up this reality that I like to dive a little deeper. Fermions and bosons are basically what makes up our atomic field, and channeled sources call it an atomic transmission field, which is interesting. Fermions act differently than bosons. And then the Higgs boson actually is a particle that interacts with all other particles. So the other bosons are, the Higgs boson represents numbers in the field, the mathematics of it. The other bosons, photon, WZ, gluon, they are actually pictured as vectors, little vectors. And then the fermions are called spinors. And so you'll see how this is significant later. Now, I was talking to you earlier about the amplitude-hedron that they have detected because it is an object outside of space-time, and that is the only way it makes sense within their equation. So now they're recognizing there is a place outside of space-time that objects exist within that have everything to do with creating this reality. And so I wanted you to know that one of the reasons I like to use PowerPoint is because all of these objects that you're seeing are very activating. These images are meant to be activating higher consciousness within you. So I found this book about hyperspace, and some of the information in it was just so fascinating. Now, we don't need to really dive that deep into it, but since we're all kind of interested in 5D, like what's 5D, right? It started to explain some about 5D and giving us the minimal structure of 5D space as 8 tetrahedrons. A 5D tetrahedron becomes an octahedron when projected into tri-space. It's all projection and reflection. The 4 sections of the positive pyramid, or the upper pyramid, like a Merkaba, if you're familiar with a Merkaba, correspond to 4 harmonically integrated structures such as radio circuits, musical strings, resonating together. 4 people united by mental telepathy becomes a 5D person. What? But we know how music and, musical harmony, harmonics, resonating at higher frequencies, definitely have everything to do with projecting us into 5D. So, these structures that these scientists identified existing outside of space-time is what you're going to see now, and it's meant to be activating higher consciousness within you. This is the analysis of that structure on the right side and how it breaks down into the particles of our reality. And so know, too, that these more complex structures are what creates the realities of higher dimensions, right? And so we're familiar with the 3D platonic solids, but as you move into the higher dimensions, they take on more dimensionality. And so they become more complex structures. But I like to think of it all as this beautiful spherical mandala of all of these different sacred geometry patterns, colors, frequencies, designs, right? Art in motion. This is that E8 crystal again, that beautiful structure is being projected from the 8th dimension into the 4th dimension to derive 3D. This picture is out of J.J. Hertock's book. You can tell I'm a huge fan. But I think it says it all right there. And what is it projecting? But the tetrahedrons that are the base fundamental pattern of creation. To create planes, spiraling planes. Okay, so we talked about then how this reality is being projected from the 8th dimension, from the E8 crystal. What about us? Where are we being projected from? What if we're being projected from the 9th dimension? If we're the ones creating these worlds and projecting them, we need to be in a higher dimension, right? If we're the computer programmers, right? And so I imagine an E9 soul crystal. That would be the 9th chakra we were talking about, the oversoul orb. And again, we can imagine it's this beautiful spherical mandala, right? With all of these incredible patterns of sacred geometry, light, color, sound, creating our own unique being. Okay, now this was taken from that book about hyperspace, but I think you'll find it really interesting. We're able to see three-dimensional geometry because our minds are fourth dimensional. That's probably not the first time you've heard that. Many people believe the Akashic records are in the fourth dimension. This is like all 3D consciousness held in the fourth dimension. A four-dimensional mind is able to fuse all the two-dimensional images of our material senses into a single three-dimensional structure. Many people believe that this reality is being projected from a 2D flat surface. Also that we may actually be two-dimensional beings. It's only our senses that make us seem three-dimensional. And that this reality may be being projected from the 2D flat surface of a black hole because all of the information in a black hole isn't contained within the black hole, it's contained on the surface. So it's a two-dimensional surface, maybe projecting two-dimensional holograms which only appear three-dimensional to our senses. But remember, we're evolving because of this advanced knowledge. This is called Calabi-Yau space. So a little beyond my pay grade, but it does have to do with every point in space-time is filled with this Calabi-Yau space. By expanding your mind into the fifth dimension, you are able to perceive 4 dimension of hyperspace in the same way that you now see 3. Cool. All the common material structures we see dancing in the quadridimensional continuum of empty space are really tridimensional cross-sections of hyperspatial entities. You want to take a picture of that because I think you're really going to impress your friends. When you're able to tell them, listen, all the structures dancing in this quadridimensional continuum of empty space are really tridimensional cross-sections of hyperspatial entities. Whoa, you're so smart. Yes, I am. Ay, ay, ay. Are we hyperspatial entities? Yes, we are. But I like this. In other words, your personal body is an eternal God-like being, yes, that has numerous other cross-sections manifest in this reality. We are God consciousness, just dispersed throughout these multiple timelines and dimensions. God is experiencing through us as us, right? Your entire life represents the continuous extension of your body through 4-dimensional space. 3 dimensions of structures. What's the other dimension?
Three dimensions of structures.
The 4th dimension is time. You look like you're nodding, so I'm like, he knows. The 4th dimension is time, right? And the 3rd dimension can't exist without time because the 3rd dimension only has endurance in time. And so the 3rd dimension is reliant upon the higher 4th dimension for its continuum. Does that make sense? From each instant of your 4-dimensional body, all the alternative lives you have led, if you acted differently, branch off into the 5th dimension of hyperspace. Whoa. I mean, quantum physicists have been trying to say this for quite some time. So just for ease of understanding, if you're walking down the street and you come to a T and you could go right or you could go left and you can't decide, you split and go both right and left. One aspect of you goes there, the other aspect of you goes there. And now 2 of you is experiencing parallel realities with different outcomes. So I had to draw this. Who's here familiar with the Philadelphia experiment? Whoa, what happened there? A huge battleship was catapulted into hyperspace and got stuck in a wormhole. And the two dudes who jumped overboard ended up 20, 40 years into another timeline, right? And so this experiment happened on August 13th, 1943. And the technology for this came from the aliens, and they outright say they were working with beings from Sirius and the Tall Grays, who gave them the technology to create aboard the ship a way to become invisible. And that was their whole idea, is to make the battleships, the aircraft, invisible so they couldn't be detected on radar. In fact, they couldn't even be seen in the reality, right? So these alien beings gave them this technology, which included Tesla coils, a pulse generator, a frequency transmitter. And when they put all of this into function, that little tube, looks like a tire, represents the torus of time. They realized that if you continue around the torus, you would stay in the same time stream, time locked. But if you could go around the torus just 60 degrees, you would phase out of this reality and become invisible. And they knew they could do it with these Tesla coils, with frequency, with pulse generation, right? And so all good. Except because past, present, and future exist all at once, in Montauk, August 13th, 1983, they were conducting an experiment where they had this radar tower that was transmitting these high-powered electromagnetic frequencies. Also, August 13th, every 10 years, 1943, 53, 63, 73, 83, but particularly every 20 years, 43, 63, 83, there's a particular atmospheric anomaly that influences the electromagnetism in our atmosphere. So these three things collide. As they begin to do the Philadelphia experiment, not only do you have the atmospheric anomaly, but you have this experiment going on in 1983, August 13th, in Montauk. Because all three events collide, the experiment goes haywire. And not only do they go 60 degrees around to make the battleship invisible, it goes 90 degrees around. And 90 degrees around, phase shifts you into a completely other timeline. It catapulted the battleship into hyperspace. It was sustained within a wormhole because it was pulsating negative energy. And physicists say the only way to open a wormhole and to keep it open is by pulsating negative energy. And the generators were doing that. The dudes who jumped overboard, Al Beeler and another dude, Duncan Cameron, because they jumped overboard, they ended up in 1983. So here they were in 1943, 1 minute, and literally less than 2 minutes later, they're standing in 1983 in Scotty's Junction near Area 51 in Nevada. They walk into a bar and they're playing colored television. And they're thinking, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. And so ultimately, through a series of events, they're able to connect with the original scientists who were involved in the Philadelphia experiment, now 40 years older. They end up going to the Montauk base. Guess what? Duncan 1, 23, meets Duncan 2, 63. Right? Whoa. The scientists tell them the things they were doing at the Montauk base with time are remarkable. In fact, they called them time engineers. They were traveling into the past and changing events in the past to fit their agenda to change the present. Like, we didn't lose a war, we won a war. And suddenly the present is better for it. But they're kind of doing this all within their own agenda of how they want the present to be, and without our permission, right? Going in and changing events in the past to affect the present. They're also sending these Montauk boys into the past, dematerializing, rematerializing in the other reality, and coming back, and their molecular makeup isn't quite the same. So it's really unfortunate what was happening to the Montauk boys during all of these experiments. But So then the scientists said, what you have to do is you have to go back into that wormhole and turn off those pulse generators. It's the only way to get the battleship out of the wormhole and back into 1943, right? And so because they were time engineers, they knew how to send these two guys into the wormhole. They turned off the pulse generators and boom, the battleship's back in 1943. However, physical bodies aboard were embedded in the craft because their molecular regeneration wasn't what it originally was. Who knows what happened to their souls, right? These scientists say they knew that when a soul drops into a fetus, it becomes time-locked into that timeline. And as long as the soul stays time-locked in this timeline, you can proceed on a linear path. However, if you get unlocked, if your soul gets unlocked somehow from this timeline, you can get lost in space. And a soul retrieval is necessary to retrieve your soul. So these dudes got unlocked from their time-space continuum when this project happened, right? So I really like the way that these scientists who were involved in that project, because I saw this documentary about them that was made in 1980, and they were explaining the experiment in detail and the science behind it. They were explaining that there's 3 dimensions of space. Of course, we know that. Then there's the 4th dimension of time, the arrow of time. They're all perpendicular to one another. But then there's a 5th dimension that creates a spinner, they call it. This spinner around the arrow of time, which actually projects time forward. And they call that the 5th dimensional effect on reality. So it just gives us something to think about, right? I don't know how you think about the 5th dimension, but I keep imagining this higher dimensional plane where everything is more paired to cycle, right? But what if it's really just a 5th dimensional effect on this reality we're living right here and now? Remember, the fermion is a spinner, right? And so we think about spinning creates a higher frequency. We can even imagine the electrons spinning around the nucleus of the atom faster. We're atomic molecular beings. As we evolve, as we become more spiritual, we're all vibrating at a higher frequency. Right? So we start to tune into this 5th dimensional effect on the reality, right? This spiraling higher frequency that gives us 5th dimensional abilities. And what are those abilities? But to time travel, right? Just like the spinners go around the torus of time, I do past life regressions for my clients. I take them into their own light trance state where they tell me, I'm in 1920. I see all of these vehicles. I'm a man. You know what I mean? It's like, whoa. And sometimes I'll take them into a light trance and they'll project into the future. And suddenly they're a humanoid being on another star system, right? They have the ability to time travel into the past, into the future, right? 5th dimensional gifts, skills, and abilities facilitated by the 5th dimensional effect on reality. So this hyperspace book says that we are 6th dimensional consciousness, experiencing the 5th dimensional effect on reality. All of our thoughts and actions recorded in the 4th dimension, and here we have this 3rd dimensional structure of time and space. So just to, explore different ideas about multidimensionality, and are these different dimensional effects on reality, or is it really different planes of reality? But what if we're already on the plane that we're meant to be on, and we're just vibrating at higher frequencies, experiencing a higher frequency version of it? And here we go. Back to hyperspatial entities. You have a 6th dimensional consciousness holding your hyperspatial body all together. Well, we are in hyperspace, right? Which enables you to review the past and contemplate all probable futures of alternative actions, you can access the Akashic Records. Who here has had Akashic Records reading or can maybe access the Akashic Records yourself, right? Awesome. It's very real. We're tuning in to other aspects of who we're being in these other virtual realities. And I think it's really helpful in evolving and advancing us when we reunite with our higher dimensional aspects. Why? Because they're more advanced and evolved. They have more of their DNA activated. They have more of their brain online. So when we do a soul merge with our higher dimensional, more advanced and evolved aspects, it brings more of our DNA online, more of our brain online, and we become more advanced and evolved. That's why I like to do multidimensional soul reunions, which I learned how to do after a missing time experience in Sedona. I kid you not. My friends and I actually lost 4 hours of time after going on my back deck and seeing a huge explosion of light on the horizon. Then we all looked at each other and were cold and said, why are we standing out here? We went inside, we were exhausted, and we were also kind of disoriented. And I said, I don't know, I'm going to bed at 8 o'clock at night, but I'm going to bed. I went in the kitchen, turned my phone over, 12:40. We were shocked. The next day, we all felt disoriented, dizzy. We were all stunned. It's not like we were saying, oh my God, you think we got taken up? We were just stunned, staring into space like, whoa, what do you think happened? Plus, we didn't feel well. It felt like our insides were vibrating at a higher frequency than our physical body could catch up with. So we felt nauseous, dizzy, disoriented. Then I went to a psychic in Sedona later who told me she had this whole vision of this craft coming down in an invisibility shield, taking me and my 2 friends into a pod ship, into a larger ship. And she said there we were downloaded with advanced skills, knowledge, gifts, abilities, what have you. In a couple weeks, I started drawing circles, and 12 circles around the circles, like the zodiac wheel, but I knew they were dimensions. And I knew what these dimensions were and what they were for and who I was in each of these dimensions, what I was doing there. It all just came in this massive download. And then I realized I could do it for others. I could do their multidimensional chart and tune into who they were being in these other. Then it sort of advanced to them telling me who they were being, because it's more believable when you're able to see that reality for yourself. So this talks a little bit about hemi-hyperspheres, and it gets a little bit complex, but it shows how reality works in time loops going round and round, maybe with a black hole at the center. Oop. This is just a picture of our E9 soul crystals descending into hyperdimensional space. All right, what's up with the double slit experiment? Are you tired of hearing about it? Right, I mean, basically we know that everything is waves of potential until we observe it as the intelligent observer, and only then does it collapse into particles. And there's been multiple experiments to prove this, right? And so this gives us some empowerment to know that as we move through our reality, it's only waves of potential until we walk through it as an intelligent observer. Only then does it collapse into the forms that we see all around us, right? I think our reality is being projected through us by the source self projecting us, right? But as we walk through it, only then does it collapse. And what determines the forms that it collapses into? That's based on our intentions, our expectations, our belief systems, our programming. And of course, on this planet, we're all living in a consensus reality where we've all agreed that this is a podium, that that's a chair, right? Donald Hoffman, a neuroscientist, has now realized through retinal science that our retinas aren't viewing this reality. They're projecting it. Whoa. Right? Is our eternal soul essence seeing through our eyes and projecting this reality before us? But maybe our free will comes in because we're able to collapse the waves into forms we intend to see, expect to see, or magically manifest in our reality, right? Because if we can collapse the waves into forms, we can determine the forms we wish to manifest in our reality. I think we do that through visioning, and why vision boards are so effective and so powerful. If we can see it, right, in our imagination, then we can bring it into manifestation in our reality. Who here has put something on a vision board and it totally came into manifestation? Magically. It's miracle manifestation. We just have to have a strong enough intention that we're projecting into the field. Then it's the emotion that sets the energy into motion, right? So when you have that vision, you have to include the emotional charge, because without the emotional charge, you don't set the energy into motion for the manifestation. Does that make sense? I think that is the key. So when I think about something I want to bring into manifestation, I think about how excited I'm going to be when it comes into manifestation. Right in that moment, I get supercharged about it, and I supercharge that potential, I think. What do you think? Right? So then they did this delayed choice double slit experiment, which was like, because they didn't observe the wave until after it went through the slits. Then it behaved as if it was particles going through the slit all along. It went back into the past, changed itself from wave to particle, and became the particles on the opposite board. So that tells me that these particles are intelligent themselves. Of course they are. All of the universe is intelligent. Every atom, every proton, photon are all intelligence. It's an intelligent universe, and we're intelligent beings creating within it. Because it's intelligent, we can communicate with it, right? And these little particles are intelligent. And they're like, hey, I know you're looking at me. I'm going to go back in the past and blow your mind and become something else on the other side, right? They're intelligent. Right? So we want to be ascending avatars, and so we are, right? We're making this intentional effort to consciously evolve every day with every thought, word, and action aligned with pure unconditional love, right? And when we have a thought that's anything less than that, we have a grace period to redirect it before it is stored in our records, right? And this comes from the group Abraham that was channeled through, who can tell me, the lady who, thank you, the Hicks. Bless you, Abraham Hicks. And so they say that if you have a thought that's anything other than unconditional love, judgment about another, resentment, blame, right, that you have the opportunity to redirect that within a grace period of time to a higher thought, and then that is what's stored in your records, and that is what helps you to evolve. When you start to have negative thoughts, it lowers your vibration, and you what? Devolve. Right? We don't want that. We want to stay on our evolutionary journey. So all day long, we check ourselves up. I was in the airport yesterday. That's a good opportunity to check your judgment, right? And I was like, seriously? And then I thought, stop. My God, what are you doing? Like, love every person that you see. If you start to judge someone like, I can't believe they're doing that right now, stop. I love that they're doing that right now. I love what they're wearing. I love how they're acting. I love you. I love all of you for all the ways that you are. And you shift it, and it's funny how suddenly you're like, this is a much better reality than standing here in judgment. And right, who am I to judge, right? It's probably judging me. It's like, why are we all doing this to each other? Let's just love everyone. And it makes for such a better reality. It was an immediate shift into higher consciousness. Okay, so we master this game, 3D game. Then what? We shift into a higher game. Who here is ready for a new game? Right? We're tired of separation and suffering. We're ready to move into unity, peace, harmony, right? It's up to us to create it. Remember, we're thinking our reality into being. What are you thinking? What are you thinking that's creating the reality around us? Right? Are you praying for peace, harmony, and unity? Tune out of the mainstream news. Who stopped watching news? I mean fake news, right? I'm tired of being programmed by the low vibrational fear, right? It's all about inciting fear and lowering our vibration. Because what? When we're vibrating at a higher frequency, we're harder to control, right? We're more empowered and we know we're creating our reality. And so, what are we thinking into being? We, as a spiritual community, collectively are creating the new 5D Earth, right? Here we are at Conscious Life Expo. This is 5D, right? We're 5D right now. We're not sitting in some cubicle being programmed by some mainstream news or some mean boss, right? We're here at Conscious Life Expo. Who here feels like they're living a 5D life already? 60, right? It said we're 6-dimensional consciousness. You've been paying attention. Right? I feel like I'm living a 5D life, and the more that we believe it and we think it, we bring it into being. Then there we are, new 5D Earth together. No more war, no more separation, no more hierarchy. Everyone is equal. No one's better than anybody else. Woohoo! Who wants to create that? I love that. Yes, and so we are intentionally leveling up. That's what Ascension is all about, an expansion of consciousness, which I feel is all inclusive of all of the lower dimensions, right? Just like we're aware of 2-dimensional or 1-dimensional objects, when we move into the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, it's an expansion of consciousness, right? And so we can still tune into all of the lower dimensions. That's how these higher dimensional beings like ascended masters, right, can reach out and communicate with us. Sometimes we get a little help leveling up. This was taken in Sedona. Sedona is one of those gateway places on the planet. It's definitely a UFO hotspot. Yes, and so who knows what happens when we get a little help leveling up. One of the things that made me so fascinated by all of this is that my father, when he was just 18 years old, he had an experience of missing time also. Lived out in a little town called Leader, Saskatchewan. Him and 4 buddies were driving down a dirt road one night when they saw this big bright white light in front of them, behind them, out in the field. So my father was driving and pulled over. He wanted to see if this white light would pass them. Him and his buddy got out of the car, leaned against the driver's side door. The next thing they know, they were all sitting in the car. They see this white light race across the field, merge with a larger orange light, which takes off into space. So they go to the nearest farmhouse and are banging on the door. You guys seeing these lights? The woman was furious that they were knocking on her door after midnight. Midnight? We just left the house at 8 o'clock. We live right down the road. And they realized, oh, shoot. We've lost 4 hours of time. The next day, my father realized he had a triangular shape object embedded in his wrist. When we were old enough not to be too freaked out by the story, he told us the story because it changed his life. And he called this his alien chip. I kid you not. We had Whitley Schreiber's book on our table, like a coffee table book. He would hold his wrist. And so my father lived in the middle of nowhere, one-room schoolhouse. He, after that, was recruited by NCR, came out to this small town, recruited him. Ultimately, he became a pioneer on the front lines of the emerging computer age. With no more than a high school education in a one-room schoolhouse. He attributed it to his alien chip. We were moved to Mount Shasta for me to be born, where I was born and spent the first few years of my life. Then we were moved to Dayton, Ohio, because that's where NCR headquarters are, in Dayton, Ohio. Right next to what? Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Who started NCR? The Wright brothers, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Jim Patterson started NCR. I'm sorry, the Wright brothers, I think, were the airplane dudes, right? Jim Patterson founded NCR. And so you see that connection between NCR and Wright-Patterson. My father was German speaking because his mother was German. And he was very involved with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And on Sunday evenings, he would bring these German-speaking men to our house, and my mother would usher us into the back bedrooms, and they would lay out plans, pore over these blueprints. It was only later, when I found out about Project Paperclip, that I was like, whoa, I wonder if my dad was involved in Project Paperclip. He was very quiet about his work. He didn't share what he was involved in the workplace whatsoever. So I never knew, but I just suspected. But this is where I got involved in all this, and I imagine that's what it's like when you get implanted or just downloaded. Okay, so these opportunities to quantum jump into different realities, right, are... So we've been seeing all this hardware technology, Tesla coils, frequency generators, pulse generators, but there's also spiritual technologies, right? So that we can use spiritual technology to quantum jump into hyperspace as hyperspatial entities that we are, right? And I believe, thank you, that we can do this through activating the Kundalini energy, moving through the 7 embodied chakras, into the 8th Merkaba light vehicle, furthermore into the higher chakras, right? We might equate even these levels of consciousness within our beings with dimensions, right? So here we are in the 3rd dimension, and in this dimension, very focused on power, right? Now as we move into the transitional 4th dimension, it's all about love. And that's the only thing that's going to catapult us into the next higher chakra, which is the 5th dimension, let's say, which is about communion, community, unity consciousness, right? And so I think it's kind of fascinating. You were just saying we are 6th dimensional consciousness. So the 6th chakra.
No, we can reach it also, but the only way that I know is through the 0 point. Reaching the 0 point, you can reach the future, but also the past.
Right, and is the 0 point?
The time and the 0 point.
Yeah.
You can reach the future.
Is the 0 point in our heart space? I mean, I've always wondered, like, we're here and now. Like, the way that I've had transcendental experiences is by being very present in the now moment, and then imagining the here and now intersecting in my heart space, going into a state of pure love, right? And then I'm present in the eternal now moment in love. And in that space, I've had very like transcendent experiences. Like I didn't have to take plant medicine. I just started like, and I'm wondering then if like the 0 point is in your heart.
Yeah, it's in your heart. It's the center of everything.
Ah, thank you for that. In the heart center, right? So, thank you. Spiritual technology, moving into your heart, being heart-centered, right? Can move you into that 0 point where then you can transcend time, right? You can quantum jump into other timelines, into the future, right? 0 point. Thank you. Portal. So this is what I was talking about earlier about some of these charts that I do through multidimensional soul readings. And coming up, I did this for a gal named Angeline. And this is what came through us for her interactively. Of course, we know you're both human and divine, and that's what's represented by the Merkaba, right? The downward-facing triangle is who we are as humans. The upward-facing tetrahedron is who we are as divine. And when they're merged, we are both human and divine. We know God is experiencing through us as us. We are God. We are God, Goddess. In simple terms, right? We are simply divine. Oop. So I like to equate these positive affirmations with each of the 7 chakras. I have free will, imperative, I am creative, powerful, I am love, I am word, I am intuitive, I am divine. And when we say these affirmations, when we move through the chakras, we activate them. Ultimately, I am that I am, right? As we move into the 8th Merkaba golden light body vehicle, which is also a vehicle of time translation. And in one of J.J. Hurtak's books, the Book of Knowledge, Keys of Enoch, he talks about the Merkaba light vehicle being a vehicle of time translation. And so a way that we can travel through the fabric of time-space into other timelines and dimensions. The 9th chakra, I am my eternal soul. The 10th chakra, merging with your solar body of light, opening the light tube to receive encoded photons into your biophotonic being to activate dormant DNA strands, right? I am light. We are biophotonic beings encoded. The 11th chakra, merging with galactic consciousness, plugged into the neural network of the galactic mind. I am galactic. The 12th chakra, merging with universal consciousness, plugged into the neural network of the universal mind. I am universal. And the 13th chakra, merging with the Godhead, the divine source of all that is. I am the divine source. I am that I am. And we'll end with this prayer. If you want to close your eyes and feel into this, envision it, visualize it. I feel my God flame touch my brow, the breath of love eternal now. I raise my eyes and lo I see my own great God self over me. A dazzling cloud envelops all. I hear my own God presence call. I feel a surge of love's great might. I enter deep, its breath, its light. I see within this pulsing flame. I listen and hear my secret name. I feel the glow, the great flame breath. I am the victor over death. I stand forth, free ascended now. To my heart's light, all things do bow. I am a being of cause alone, and that cause love, the sacred tone. I pour out life, I lift, I raise. My heart overflows and sings its praise. My power strengthens and inspires. My great light rays are God's own fires. I am a sun, my love its light. All else grows dim, earth lost to sight. I know that I am God the One, the Source, the great, great central sun. I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for coming. Many blessings. Namaste.